Those with wisdom know that there is only one way to redeem the world situation, and that is through a change in the inner structure of man. That is through his mindset, the way of the transformed man, the inner revolution in the mind, and not its brutal counterpart in the external world that has spilt rivers of blood and caused untold suffering. Welcome everyone to Book Study 5 of Unfolding Consciousness, Exploring the Living Universe and Intelligent Powers in Nature and Humans. We're in Volume 1, which is a panoramic survey, science contrasted with the Perennial Philosophy on consciousness and man. So remember, if you want to, you can skip ahead through my preambles and click the blue timestamp in the descriptions below. So you just go straight to the reading of the book. You can also click the 3 dots to see the transcript come up on your screen. And closed captioning is enabled, so please click the gear icon and make sure you have CC turned on. And we are still at the very, very beginning on the early pages before it even begins. So we're on page little Roman numeral XI, so 11. Today, we finish Eddie's personal note to readers with the 4th observation of Eddie asking you, the reader, permitting him to pass on 4 observations hard won through experience. So finally, with number 4, the need to listen to all, but to maintain one's own counsel. Art thou able to walk alone was a testing question once put to a contemporary sage and philosopher in his younger days. Those who are not sure about how to answer might care to take to heart this extract from another adept. Be prepared for loneliness, it is the law. This must be endured and passed. Additionally, have patience. Endurance is one of the characteristics of the aspirant. Whatever societies we may or may not belong to, we can listen to all, but we must ultimately walk our own path alone. On that score, over the last decade, I have been in the constant company of my ever-faithful friend Solitude. So those amongst my acquaintances, most likely unaware of my acute need for seclusion in writing this work, cannot be entirely blamed for mistaking my necessarily excessive demands for protracted solitude with unfriendliness and aloofness. As this work is about the perennial philosophy, the eternal wisdom, and our claim that by its very nature it provides the solution to the problems that beset any age, given that the COVID-19 pandemic was the backdrop for part of this time as this work was being written, how does the perennial philosophy shine a light on such a watershed moment in history? First, we need to be clear that we are not claiming that this wisdom had foreseen and analyzed every complexity or detail of this or any other generation, but that from an understanding of the fundamental verities of life comes the method and correct solution and the means to cope intelligently with those great cultural, intellectual, moral, and social problems, which, in their unsolved state, confront the humanity of all times, as the past century of political unrest, terrorist violence, often in the name of religion, ecological disasters, and the recent pandemic bears ample witness. In other words, we have all the tools we need to solve our problems, if we can but grasp these verities of life and work with Prometheus, foresight, as well as learn from our mistakes through Epimetheus, which is our hindsight. Has this sea change in all of our lives, caused by the pandemic, raised the possibility of living in a better way, a less materialistic and more environmental way, a way in which nature is regarded as a living being rather than a resource to be plundered? We have sophisticated tools at our disposal for strategic foresight and analyzing emerging trends and risks. And we have massive resources, financial, material, and scientific. We also have global institutions such as the World Health Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and worldwide humanitarian networks. The building blocks exist to build a resilient, sustainable, and adaptable future for all. But do we have the wisdom and the will to act on what we know? This is where the perennial philosophy plays an indispensable part in the necessary refining and evolution of man's character by showing us that primarily the solution lies in a reformation of man's nature and only secondarily in economic, technological, or social schemes. A solution at the physical level will not address the underlying causes. We have only to look at history to realize for ourselves that without exception, the great sages since time immemorial have sounded the clarion call to man to know himself. Not one of these luminaries wasted his life energy preaching the lure of any earthly utopia by inventing techniques and systems for dealing with the confusion and evil of the world's politics, economics, and daily life at the routine and everyday level. With unerring insight, each of them saw the futility of the conventional economic or technological way of dealing with problems when it is, in fact, man himself, the world over, who creates the ugliness and misery around him, which he then attempts to remedy by changing outer structures. Those with wisdom know that there is only one way to redeem the world situation, and that is through a change in the inner structure of man. That is through his mindset, the way of the transformed man, the inner revolution in the mind and not its brutal counterpart in the external world that has spilt rivers of blood and caused untold suffering. What can we glean from the perennial philosophy in the current global climate? Its fundamental tenet is the intrinsic unity, interrelationship, and interconnection of all life forms in nature at all levels, ranging from the physical to the spiritual, to the mightiest galaxy, to the tiniest speck of matter, even to a virus, to it. This is really tantamount to saying that all existence is essentially one organic and one living being, which may be called by the popular but overloaded term God or Brahman, or by the term we prefer, which is divine consciousness. All beings in all life, organic and so-called inorganic, thus belong together in what we call the various aspects of one simple being, like the many almost identical images which a multifaceted diamond reflects of the same one object. This is not something that can be proven by ratiocination, which means reasoning or analyzing, and is logically deducible, but it is accessible through mysticism and metaphysics, as evinced not only by the great sages, philosophers, and artists since time immemorial, but equally by legendary scientists of all ages, past and present. And what better evidence, albeit at the physical level, is there of the fragile interconnectedness of all life forms and livelihoods than the pandemic? Local communities have in general become more closely bonded as one large extended family. But have the nations of the world come any closer to this realization of unity? It is to be doubted, especially in the light of the warning by the Director General of the World Health Organization that the world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure. Why? Owing to the me first strategy to secure vaccines that many countries have adopted, whereby vaccine nationalism has resulted in unequal access to vaccines. Another cardinal teaching of the perennial wisdom is the coexistence of the spiritual, mental, intellectual, and physical worlds. Has the excessive focus on purely materialistic concepts and solutions resulted in the present imbalance due to an overdependence on technological schemes at the expense of spiritual insights? Thus has mainstream science caused as many problems as it tries to solve. Are vaccines and other physical measures not to be decried, which means denounced, nevertheless the sole means of dealing with a problem on many levels? There are bound to be other pandemics in the future. So what will it take to prepare for future disasters? They must all be approached in the light of the eternal wisdom, which teaches us that the plethora of health and social problems that currently beset individuals, societies, and nations would be greatly alleviated were this simple fact realized: that man, like all other creatures, is the outcome of divine ideation, and his body the product of divine forces, sculpted by divine handicraft. Today we are deluged with countless books that contribute little or nothing to public improvement and merely represent recreational reading or argumentative discourse dealing with scandal, gossip, and all kinds of social prejudices, conceits, and a fascination for the cancel culture that typifies our age. Clearly, society in general is paying the price of a decline in culture, moral standards, and mental health due to consuming the intellectual equivalent of junk food. On the other hand, there is no dearth, which means scarcity or lack, of scholarly books and papers nowadays on broad matters of consciousness and its relation to science and spirituality. This is a welcome development, but the current trend in serious literature seems to be heading, in my mind, towards increasing specialization or populism in the interests of making the subject user accessible, resulting in many cases with presentation at the expense of content. The consciousness, science, spirituality bandwagon trundles along on three well-oiled wheels. So to those who might find my work overly cumbersome or abstruse, I can only respond by quoting a passage from a book by the great 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. I part with a book with a deep seriousness, in the sure hope that sooner or later it will reach to those whom alone it can be addressed. And for the rest, patiently resigned that the same fate should, in full measure, befall it. That in all ages has to some extent befallen all knowledge, and especially the weightiest knowledge of the truth, to which only a brief triumph is allotted, between the two long periods in which it is condemned as paradoxical or disparaged as trivial. The former fate is also to want to befall its author. But life is short, and truth works far and lives long. Let us speak the truth. Who wrote this work is of lesser consequence than the fact that it had to be and was written. Well over a decade of protracted effort in producing it has provided little pleasure, but boundless joy. Anyone who has been involved in strenuous creative endeavor will need no explanation of what I mean. May you, the reader, however, reap both in abundance. On contacting Eddie, if this work has touched you in some way and you would like to share your thoughts or your comments, your reflections, you are welcome to do so. Any faults, Eddie says, are his and have nothing to do with the subject matter of science, spirituality, or occult science. So if you have spotted any obvious omissions and or errors, please do contact the writer. I will include his email address right here, or you can visit the publisher's website, which is shepherdwalwyn.com. And that wraps up the text for today. This is so powerful, so profound, so timely, so important. Thank you all for being here. Your comments and questions are most welcome. And if this is new to you, please go back and watch the earlier book studies. You can just keep following along. I want to get this out there. Remember to put on closed captions or pull up the transcript so you can follow along word for word. There will always be a timestamp so you can go directly to the reading of the book and skip past my ramblings. A little bit hoarse. They're going to get really interesting after this. It's full force, straight ahead. I have often called Unfolding Consciousness the secret teachings of all ages for the new millennium. And it is an honor of honor to work with these teachings with you and with Eddie, who is a humble student of the ancient teachings. And this work is his labor of love. It's currently only available in hardback as a 4-volume set from Shepherd Walwyn, but we are working on getting ebooks out there, abridged versions, study manuals, audio versions, translations, and I'm just beginning these studies here, these readings here, so we have something that we can all have access to at no cost. I look forward to becoming more interactive with you. We are getting there. We're getting there. Meanwhile, if you enjoyed this video, please share with other like-minded souls. These teachings belong to everyone and solely to no one. Eddie did not come up with perennial philosophy. This is ancient. He has lovingly explained, detailed, and illuminated the wisdom in these 1,000+ pages, and he has made it available to the world. We would love to hear from you, and I'll see you again soon.